Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. We're so happy that you chose to spend a little time with us this afternoon, and we are going to have an excellent discussion today about things to do or not do to keep ourselves healthy. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Thank you, Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens. Hello, Dr. Walks and Dr. Hines. We're going to do a very relevant rerun today on heat. At least out here in California is hot, in DC is hot. The only place where it made it relatively cool seems to be Tennessee. So let's roll them, Simon. Oh, Simon Cooper.
Calling Simon Cooper RT Mobile.
She refuses to go, but it's hot down there. And I noticed that, especially in the Southeast, it's been really hot and humid. So let's put up the first slide, Simon. And I would invite my co-moderators to speak on some of these slides as we go. We want to give you tips and look out for those alligators that Dr. Neighbor-Stevens brought up from Tampa.
Mm. It's the pythons I'm worried about.
Wow.
As many of you know, I have sometimes a sight impediment, so I ask my co-moderators to help me with some of the slides. Go to the next slide, Simon. So there's something called cardiorespiratory fitness, and it's been linked to cancer risk and mortality. We know that many of us younger people are trying to be fit, walk and run every day and work out in the gym. And there are higher levels of cardiorespiratory fitness that may offer protection from colon cancer, lung cancer, and from lung cancer and prostate cancer. Next slide. So you want to be fit. We know that there's benefits of being fit. Their higher cardiovascular fitness levels may be associated with significantly lower risk of colon cancer, and that risk factor is 0.72 for moderate and 0.63 for high fitness. Let's go to the next slide.
Dr. Maxey, are you going to define cardiorespiratory fitness?
It means that you're able to breathe with a certain level of oxygen intake, that your cardiac abilities make you more functional, that your blood pressure is well controlled. And those are what I call cardiovascular fitness without getting into high technology. Do you have another definition you'd like to add?
Well, some people attach the resting heart rate and maximum heart rate reach during exercise as part of that as well.
And recovery time, right? So after you exercise, how long does it take for your heart rate to come back? After you stop exercising, how long does it take for your heart rate to get back to normal? So the longer it takes for your heart rate to get back to normal after you stop exercising, I'm summarizing, the less fit, right? So the more fit you are, your heart rate will go up, meet the demand for exercise, right? And then when you stop exercising, it'll come back down, to wherever your baseline is. And the more fit you are, your heart rate won't necessarily go quite as high as it will, like when you exercise, as it will for those of us who are less fit. So for example, lots of times you'll do those calculations for what's your target heart rate, for your age, on the different machines or those kinds of things. When you first start exercising, you might find out that a little bit of walking, right, can get you to that target heart rate. And then as you keep exercising, it will take a higher level of intensity to get to that target heart rate because you are becoming more fit in your cardiorespiratory system.
So on one of our next sessions, I want to go a little bit more into detail because this is queered by the fact that so many older people are taking medicines like beta blockers, eye drops, that have things that don't give you a good resting heart rate in the first place. So it's going to be different. We need to define some of those. But in truth, you're right, Dr. Hines, that how you recover is good. But one person may have a resting heart rate that's healthy at 80 and another at 60. So we have to go a bit more detail in that. Dr. Walks?
So let me give a concrete example. I like numbers. And this is the weekend of the United States Track and Field Championships. And the technology is amazing now. They've strapped these sort of Fitbit kinds of things on the athletes. Before the women's 100 meters, before the race, they were showing one of the runners whose resting heart rate is 61. And just before the race started, her heart rate was up to 160. Now, if my heart rate is at 160, it's about to stop, and someone needs to call 911, which is why we always talk about consulting with your physician. As Dr. Maxey just said, we all need to know what's normal for us. So having a doc, a family practice doc, a nurse practitioner, someone that can tell you when it's healthy for you to exercise. Don't just go out there and sign up for the next marathon. It's really important that we understand this. So Dr. Maxey, I think it's great that we can go into more depth on this because it's something we can all get outside and walk or run. And if we don't do it carefully, we can have some consequences that are not good.
Okay. Well, looking at hot weather, extreme heat is defined as summertime temperatures that are much hotter and are humid than our average. And because some places are hotter than others, this depends on what's normal, average, where you live in that location at that time of the year. Humid and muggy conditions can make it seem hotter than it really is. Next slide. So there are heat-related illnesses, such as heat exhaustion or heat stroke. They happen when the body is not able to properly cool itself. The body normally cools itself by sweating. During extreme heat, this might not be enough. In many cases, a person's body temperature rises faster than it can cool off. This can cause damage to the brain and other vital organs. In fact, it can cause decay of muscle, kidney failure, and you can actually die from being too hot. Next slide. So heat-related illnesses. Dr. Walks, would you help me with this slide?
Absolutely. The first bullet. Some factors that might increase your risk of developing a heat-related illness will include high levels of humidity, obesity, fever, dehydration, some prescription drug use, heart disease, mental illness, poor circulation, sunburn, or alcohol use.
Next slide, Simon. So heat exhaustion is a condition that happens when your body overheats. Symptoms might include heavy sweating, a rapid pulse. It's one of 3 heat-related illnesses, with heat cramps being the most mildest one, and heat stroke being the most serious. Causes of heat illness include exposure to high temperatures, particularly when there is also high humidity and strenuous physical activity. With prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to, without prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to heat stroke and life-threatening conditions. Fortunately, heat exhaustion is preventable. Next slide. I want to do this one again. Dr. Hines, would you mind doing this? And then I'm going to come to Dr. Neighbor-Stevens. And you can comment more on each one as you want to.
Symptoms of heat exhaustion may start suddenly or progress over time, especially with prolonged periods of exercise. And they can include cool, moist skin with goosebumps when the heat, heavy sweating, faintness, dizziness, fatigue, a weak but rapid pulse, low blood pressure upon standing, which is usually going to make you feel dizzy.
I can't hear you right now.
So the other ones would be muscle cramps, nausea, and headache.
Now, all of these can be affected by the medication you take, especially taking diuretics, beta blockers, high blood pressure medicine, and even some psychiatric medicines, Dr. Walks, are affected, especially in heat. And even though I'm aiming this mainly at people in Dr. Walks' age group, this is doubly important for children and babies, that we have to be concerned about them and not leave them in cars, and be careful about even when we have them out in the park and run up and down the slide. We all have to be careful about people not being able to get rid of heat. Next slide.
Can I just add to
But
that?
also, before we move on,
Yes.
I was just also going to say for your recreational folks, right? You're outside playing, it's a lovely day. Even being out, for example, at a pool or at the beach, sometimes you may not notice some of these things because you're in the water. Sometimes that tiredness that you feel from the sun could easily be, dehydration, dizziness. You're on your way, but you may not even notice it in the water. But water's not on the inside of your body, so just something to think about. And then other times too, like athletes in particular, there used to be a time when for your athletes. When you were exhibiting these symptoms and complaining about them, they were seen as a sign of weakness, right? Push through that headache, push through that nausea, just go ahead and throw up and keep it moving. Luckily, for the most part, that's not the approach that's taken anymore, but it's still something to think about when you're out there insisting on going for your morning, mid-afternoon jog. That's when you usually go, but also degrees and 80% humidity, that may not be the best time to do that.
Thank you. Next slide, Simon. Dr. Neighbor-Stevens.
When to see a doctor? If you think you have heat exhaustion, stop all activity and rest and drink. Move to a cooler place, water, that is. Drink cool water and I'm going to be very careful about how I say this, hydration drinks, because apparently we can maybe talk about this a little bit later. There's controversy right now about some drinks that are being excessively consumed apparently by people under 18 in their in the energy drink category. And what we're talking about are the hydration drinks. Contact your doctor if your symptoms get worse or they don't improve within an hour. If you're with someone who has heat exhaustion, seek immediate medical help if they become confused or distressed, lose consciousness, or are unable to drink. If their core body temperature measured by a rectal thermometer reaches 104 degrees or higher, they need immediate cooling and urgent medical attention. Now, let me comment on this. As a pediatrician, rectal temperatures are what I love to hear about. But if you're talking about in an emergency situation, I doubt that you'll have a rectal thermometer in your pocketbook unless you happen to have a young child with you. So if you have any instrument that can take the temperature and you understand how to use that instrument, and by that I mean you understand what its reading is relative to 0 and 32 degrees, so that you understand what it's really saying. Don't get hung up on the rectal thermometer, because what we don't want to see is someone whose internal temperature, which is most accurately measured by rectal temperatures, we don't want to see them above 101.
So just splash some cold water on me. Don't take my rectal temperature. Next slide, please. Those excellent points, Dr. Neighbors.
Only a pediatrician would think about it.
So heat stroke. Without prompt treatment, heat exhaustion can lead to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening condition that requires emergency medical attention. The management of heat stroke is giving them fluids and dunking them into a cool ice water bath as quickly as possible. A common symptom of heat stroke is an altered mental state or behavior, and that is the key right there. That's the pearl. Look for confusion. If they are confused, they are having heat stroke. If anybody is in the heat and they're feeling nauseous or just not quite right, they should take a break, hydrate with cool water, and just sit down and let their body cool down. Dr. Walks, I know for a fact that some people taking medicine for mental health have problems in heat too. How will we differentiate between something going on in that realm and confusion from heat stroke? Is there something we might know about that?
Dr. Maxey, I would recommend that we not take time to differentiate, because heat stroke can be absolutely deadly. So if someone is looking confused and they're in the heat, especially if they stop sweating, you want to get them. The one thing I would add to this slide is that they should take a break, hydrate, get out of the heat, hydrate with cool water, and just let yourself cool down. And after you make sure that they're not about to have a real problem with heat stroke, then you can begin to ask questions about differentiating whether they took their medicines, whether they had some sort of a change in their mental status that is not unusual for them, or someone who is a loved one or someone who is with them can tell you about what their normal reaction is. But when someone is in the heat and experiencing these symptoms, you want to get them out of the heat, get them some fluids, calm them, help them to cool down. That would be my advice. Now, I would love to have Dr. Lawson, who is with us and is a psychiatrist extraordinaire, to see if Dr. Lawson has something else to add to this concern about mental health or the status of mental health folks.
But first, did he invite you to have barbecue at his house yet?
No, man, you know how he is.
Not that. No, I just want to thank you for bringing this up. I just want to say there's a lot of literature now showing that there is a relationship between the climate and certain kinds of, quote, violent behavior. People not only become stuporous, but they also show problems with impulse control. And so it's not something you can do with a particular individual. But what we're finding is there's some real issues in terms of certain parts of the world, certain parts of the country, especially now when there's a worldwide pandemic of heat that's infecting a lot of cities. It's not just crowding. There's something about the direct stimulation of the hypothalamus in terms of these kinds of extreme temperatures. But saying that, also, I'm glad you made the point also, don't bother to differentiate, because unfortunately, some people do become confused, don't know what's going on, and you don't know, is this because they had too much alcohol, for example, or drugs of abuse, or is it just that they've been out in the sun too long? And one of the interesting things that happened, as many of you know, is that the sensitivity to thirst disappears, and people stop drinking fluids when they've been exposed to heat for too long. So I think those are all excellent points. It's not something that you take lightly, and especially folks that are on some of our more common, quote, leisurely drugs like alcohol and others, they can very quickly go into a situation in which they're in deep trouble health-wise.
You know, one of the things that comes to my mind, and maybe I'm being a bit cynical, but my mom and aunt used to always take me shopping in the summer, and they'd shop from dawn to dark. And I know the shopping centers now are more air conditioned, but sometimes that hard work of shopping all over the city in the heat, that can bother you as well. So we need to be careful about that and not put it to the side. Let's go to the next slide.
Can I just add one more thing about putting people in that cool ice water bath? Because I've actually been in a scenario where I was with someone who was experiencing heat stroke. And sometimes you don't have those things. You're not in a position to do that. We weren't. We were at the Grand Canyon, and we needed to drive to the nearest, hospital center. But one of the things that you can do in the meantime is you want to put ice packs, if you have them. We stopped at the 7-Eleven and got frozen peas, right? And you stick them in the armpits and in the groin area, and on the neck, right? And because those are places where you have a lot of blood flow, and that's a good place to put ice or cooling things to help somebody cool their body down until you can get to wherever the hospital destination is.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And in this slide, I just wanted to demonstrate that also you can get seizures, which can be a part of this, and rhabdomyolysis and kidney failure can happen. But the key thing is the mental confusion that you want to do an assessment on. Let's go to the next slide.
So Dr. Maxey, I know you touched on this earlier when you talked about blood pressure change when someone gets up. Dr. Gibson wanted to make sure that we emphasize that is orthostatic hypotension, so that when you get up, your blood pressure doesn't get up with you, and so folks can get up and fall down.
That's very true, and that can happen from sometimes diuretics, from the sweat that you lose, and you lose fluid by breathing. And I read an estimate that you lose 1,500 cc's of fluid a day just by breathing alone. So it's not just urinating and taking diuretics, but it can also be the amount of breathing that you do. So what about prevention? Would you read this, Dr. Walks?
Happy to. Prevention. Overall, prevention and response to heat-related illness may vary under different circumstances. Dr. Hines just gave us a great on the ground, real time example of the frozen peas from 7-Eleven can be a lifesaver. So those kinds of things can be absolutely critical. The second bullet, urban settings may have more older, lower income, and minoritized racial and ethnic groups who are more susceptible to heat-related illness, but who may live closer to medical facilities.
So this
So-
goes back to our discussion before, redlining and the
Dr.
fact that
Can we spend a little time on this, because this is a subject that, and I personally am trying to make sure that when we bring up an issue, we need to talk about solutions. Absolutely, prevention is the number one thing in our toolbox, is to prevent it from happening. But what are some other things that we need to do to help decrease the incidence of this? And this is a really serious issue because we're only going to get hotter. They said this may be the coolest summer that a lot of places see for the next several decades, unless there's some really significant changes in the way we address our carbon emissions. I've heard some very interesting discussions about urban response to this. Interestingly, I really haven't heard much about rural response, but urban response to this issue includes municipalities establishing cooling centers, even shelters for people who do not have air conditioning. We know that the urban center is going to be hotter because the street absorbs the heat and we don't have the trees to help shade and cool things down. One of the things I heard that I thought was very innovative, some group outfitted a school bus so that it became a mobile cooling station. I'm bringing this up because wherever you live, I'm willing to bet you got this issue in your city or your town. And as a citizen of that community, you need to hold your municipal officials to feet to the fire to address these issues in ways that will prevent death. We're not talking about something that is just making you uncomfortable. This is a condition that can lead to death.
maybe we should go to the next slide, Dr. Neighbors. I think somebody to address.
Let me add to what Dr. Neighbor Stevens is saying, and maybe it's on the next slide. But let me just make this comment. Finding out these things is really, in addition to making sure they're happening, finding out what is happening. A lot of jurisdictions do have cooling centers. Dr. Maxey mentioned the shopping centers, movie theaters. There are a lot of places where they keep things cool, and you need to know where those things are.
Don't leave out the libraries.
Don't leave out the libraries.
That's also the reason why some states are now moving to free public transportation for this reason, to allow people access to air-conditioned buses and things of that nature.
But my point that I want to get over, besides these great ideas that are being floated around, is to look at what's happening where you live and be an advocate for the changes necessary where you live with your city officials.
Okay. Good points. Good points. Next slide. So I read a review from the Death Valley Guide, and they had developed some policy advisories for people that they should drink between 24 and 42 ounces of water per hour if there's high heat. And we know that the heat in Death Valley is ridiculous, above 120. So they're recommending in that type of heat is between 24 and 32 ounces of water per hour in high heat. They also noted that some people would drive from Vegas for 2 hours, spend an hour and a half hiking in the 120-degree heat with only a 12-ounce water bottle. And they didn't eat, and they haven't been drinking, so heat exhaustion will obviously creep up on them. They also recommended salty stacks while out in the heat, or other forms of electrolyte replacement. But he warned against some of these drinks that have a lot of sugar in them. And if you drink too much sugar too quickly, it can lead to nausea and vomiting. So we want to look at hydration drinks. We want to be concerned how much caffeine is in them, because that can increase your heart rate in a way that shouldn't be done. And we also want to make sure that the sugar level is not unduly elevated. Next slide.
Before you go, I just want to say the story that I was referencing before. There were 3 of us who went to the Grand Canyon, and we made all of these mistakes. And there was a guy at the Grand Canyon who saw us going down the path, and he said, how far are you guys going? And one of the people that was with us said, he's going to go over to the, go all the way down to the bottom and, come up to the other side. Now, myself and the other lady that was with me, we weren't doing that, because I'm seeing, as I'm going down, I'm seeing all these other people who are half passed out. People are crying because they're exhausted and tired. But that is exactly what happened. We went. We had a regular, we had more than 12 ounces, but it was a regular water bottle. No one had eaten anything. I think the one guy had a banana. And we didn't have any snacks. And he did not heed the warning, and no one did exactly what he planned to do. We turned around because I realized that this seemed kind of awkward, all these other people. So then we came back up, and we ended up meeting him a couple hours later where we were supposed to. He was late because he was confused. He was, it was a mess. As soon as we had already called the Rangers to kind of be looking for him, because it had gotten really late, but we made every single one of these mistakes on this paper. Well, we didn't, because we turned around, but the scenario, we were unprepared is what I'm trying to say.
The key thing about many of us, we overestimate our physical fitness and what we can do. So we have to be more realistic. Next slide. Dr. Walks, you want to do this one?
Sure. This is about delayed heat exhaustion. And again, from the Death Valley Guide. Point number 1, heat-related emergency calls in the hottest season tend to follow a pattern. There are 2 periods. Calls will come in. One is midday for someone on a trail who might be experiencing heat exhaustion. The next wave of calls, we're told, comes late at night around 10 p.m. or even later, after people have spent the entire day hiking, and then they get back to their hotel, realize they're feeling ill, and start to develop some of the symptoms of heat stroke. Progression of heat-related illness may occur over many hours, can happen if someone has been exposed to outdoor heat for longer periods of time, or hiked extensively during the day.
So the lesson here is that it's not just something that can happen then, but when you get back to your hotel and you think you're cool, you can still get sick. So you still need to be observant of yourself and whoever is with you in that heat, because it can come back on you.
Can I just say, Dr. Maxey, that I have an issue with this slide, because you don't have to go to the Grand Canyon or Death Valley or on a hiking trail. You can just be trying to walk to church and back. You can be trying to walk your kids to summer camp and back. As Dr. Neighbor Stephen said earlier, these are issues in a lot of urban communities. So take this Death Valley thing and apply it to 29th and Western in Los Angeles, because there are times when we aren't doing any of the stuff we think is bad, and we're putting ourselves at risk.
Okay. It brings me to a thought. I was at Bishop Noel Jones Church some months ago, and we were taking blood pressures. As members come out from the sermon and all the things that we do in our churches, everybody had super high blood pressure. We'll comment on that later. Next slide.
Must have been a good sermon.
It always is. So would one of you read this one?
Delayed onset of heat exhaustion. According to the CDC, heat exhaustion can develop even several days after exposure. The Mayo Clinic also says prolonged periods of exercise can lead to heat exhaustion's progression over time instead of a sudden onset. For heat-related emergencies, rapid cooling is the standard of care. Immersion or dousing in cold water, removing clothing, applying ice packs or frozen peas, fanning, elevating feet, and monitoring airway and breathing. For milder cases, patients should seek shade or air conditioning and sip cool fluids.
Next slide. So there's another heat-related problem, and Dr. Gibson suggested this. I looked up some of the articles that he sent. Maybe one of you could go through this with me. It's kind of small looking for me.
Sure.
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
So kidney stones in kids. 30 years ago, kidney stones were considered a disease of middle-aged white men. Now doctors are increasingly seeing a different kind of patient suffering from the extremely painful condition, especially during summer. Kidney stones are hard deposits of minerals and salts that can get caught in the urinary tract and are now occurring in younger people, particularly among teenage girls, is what the emerging data is showing. Experts aren't sure why more children and teens are having these kidney stones, but they speculate that a combination of factors are to blame, including diets high in ultra-processed foods, increased use of antibiotics early in life, and climate change are causing more cases of dehydration.
Next slide.
You know, one of the things that we did not bring up in that discussion, or maybe it was later in that discussion, was the impact of heat on pregnant women. And there are many studies now that are showing a correlation with extreme heat and precipitation of early labor, as well as precipitation of eclampsia. So this whole matter of heat isn't just a matter of being uncomfortable. It is really a health hazard. Dr. Dawes has her hand up.
Hello from very hot. Well, actually, we're hot, but we don't go up to the 100 and something as you guys do. But what I wanted to say is one of the things we do for the summer is we actually cut back on people's diuretics. So in our offices, we sometimes change them over to other drugs, and sometimes we can just cut back on their diuretics. We do see more kidney stones, and we do educate more, but one of the things is we do use less diuretics. You hearing me?
Yes, we heard, and that is a very good strategy. Dr. Maxey, you might want to take a moment and speak to the whole effect of heat and cardiovascular health.
That's great. First of all, one of the main problems with heat and cardiovascular health is you do lose a lot of water. We know that even without heat, you lose water called insensitive loss from what you lose to your breathing, from your lungs, from your skin, even without sweating, about 1,500 cc's a day and then add to that how much you have to urinate. And if you sweat, that's even more. So I advise people at the minimum on a daily basis, you need to drink at least 1.5 to 2 liters of water per day. So just having 1 or 2 little bottles is not enough to do. I like the idea of cutting down on your diuretics because that increases the amount of water that you use. So also I decrease
Also,
the amount
I was
of
saying, also remember
caffeine.
for our older people, a lot of them are having trouble drinking anyway. All the families are complaining and they're saying, oh, they don't want to eat and they don't want to drink. So they're at very high risk. So, and somebody was saying, yeah, we use coconut water, which is helpful, and a little bit of the more juices. But we all know that we're supposed to drink more water, but getting them to do it is another thing.
I want somebody to comment on drinking Coca-Colas. Would somebody comment on that? I can't talk on that for reasons I can't say. That's the neighbor Stevens. Dr. Walks.
I'm not sure I understand the point, Dr. Maxey.
I talk about drinking more fluid, but I know somebody, a good friend of mine, who drinks tons of Coca-Colas. Suffice it to say, it's not good for you. We use Cokes to clean our batteries and clean our coin. And I'll let it go at that. I admit to visiting Dr. Dawes a few weeks ago in Jamaica, and I love the heat down there, but I like the air conditioning too, and I had plenty of ackee and sawfish. We're almost at the top of the hour. Any questions in the chat? Any questions, Dr. Walks, that's neighbor Stevens?
Can I also comment? I don't know if that's helpful here. I heard your stories about your rubber watermelon. But we have a lot of fruits that are in season right now that have high water content, such as watermelon, star fruit, our lychee has, and they're all in season. So we also encourage people, oranges, of course, to drink, to eat more fruits and eat the inside. So we tell them the orange, eat the orange peel, the inside of the orange, the white part as well, to also get more fluids in. I actually, if people can come up with ways of getting the older people to drink more, it's helpful. I do want to ask, what do you think about the flavor drops they're putting into water to make people drink more? Good, bad, or not?
I haven't looked at that. I don't know what's in the flavor drops, but plain old water is always good. But there's also a myth about people drinking alkaline water, which does nothing with the body's pH. It's just a ploy to make more money. So you cannot easily change the body pH. So that's a bunch of money-making capitalism on that. But I'll look into the flavored drinks, but just plain water or fruit water, you can squeeze lemon in the water or whatever you want to make it taste better in case you can't drink it. But we're at the top of the hour. I wish
Dr. Maxey, Dr. Lawson has his hand up.
Dr. Lawson?
Yeah, I just want to quickly, and you hinted at it, the report that mental disorders are associated with high risk, even without medication. One of the ones that we've found probably has been bipolar affective disorder. And there's been numerous reports of people who haven't had manic episodes and in prison and dying. It's under-recognized in African Americans. The person is completely normal, goes into prison, gets anxious, has a manic episode, then become hypothermic and die.
That's terrible. Dr. Lawson, I'm putting you on notice. I'm bringing Dr. Walks. I'm coming to your house to eat some barbecue one day.
I also got a rabbit and squirrel too.
All right. Let's have last thoughts, Dr. Walks.
I think we've covered a lot today, Dr. Maxey. I think that I'm going to steal Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens' comment about common sense. We know that it's not as common as it as it needs to be. And I think when we talk about things like heat, it's interesting that the original airing that we did was early in July of that year, and now we're looking at getting into early September, and folks say, well, it's after Labor Day, so summer must be over. No, it's really not. And to the earlier point about climate change and the heat that we have, I think we just have to be willing to adjust to our environment, not to what we want it to be. We can want it to be cool. We can want to go out in the middle of the day and take that walk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but we really have to use that common sense and realize that if it's 100 degrees outside, it's not the best time to go take a walk.
Thank you, Dr. Wall. That's Neighbor Stevens.
I would like to encourage everyone, as I said in the tape, to look at what's going on in your individual communities around this issue. Unfortunately, like everything, this whole issue of heat and climate change has not escaped being politicized. There were bills put forward in Florida that actually, instead of encouraging water breaks and cooling times for outdoor workers in this peak heat, they were actually decreasing those opportunities and penalizing workers for not being productive. I won't comment on why these kinds of draconian measures were put in place, but I bring this up as an example of how we have to continuously monitor what's going on in our communities, because there are people who are very busy utilizing any opportunity that they can to harm us. I just put it that way, that they're harming us. So we need to be very vigilant and active, and as I said earlier, hold their feet to the fire.
Thank you, Dr. Barbara Neighbor Stevens. My final comment will be, make sure you go to the polls and vote, and don't vote for weird people. Do not vote for weird people. Most of them are definitely against people who look like us. Have a great Sunday. Stay cool. Drink plenty of fluid. See you next week. Thank you, Simon, very much.
Good day, everyone. Bye.